Let me start with something that might make you pause for a second. In my clinic, when men sit across from me and lower their voices, they often ask the same quiet question. How do I know when a woman is truly emotionally open to me, not just being polite? What most people don't realize is that the answer has very little to do with words, flirting, or attraction on the surface. It has everything to do with one subtle boundary in the brain. And once that boundary shifts, the relationship has already changed, whether either person admits it or not. I want to be very clear from the beginning. This is not about manipulation. This is not about winning someone. This is about understanding female psychology, safety, and trust at a neurological level. Because when you misunderstand this, you hurt people without even realizing it. In my 20 years of consultation as a medical doctor and clinical psychologist, I've seen this pattern repeat itself across cultures, ages, and personalities. Women do not experience physical closeness the way men are often taught to imagine it. For a woman, the body is not separate from the nervous system. Touch is not neutral. It is processed emotionally before it is processed logically. Here is the uncomfortable truth no one warns you about. For most women, allowing access to a very specific area of personal space is not about desire first. It's about perceived safety. The female brain, especially the limbic system, is constantly scanning. Am I safe here? Am I respected? Am I emotionally held, not just physically noticed? When that answer becomes yes, something shifts internally. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone, begins to rise. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, quiets down. Muscle tension lowers. Breathing changes. This is not romantic fantasy. This is neuroscience. In my sessions, women often say things like, I didn't even realize when it happened, but once I let him there, I felt connected. Notice the language. Not excited. Not turned on. Connected. What that specific place represents is not sexual ownership. It represents emotional permission. It means I trust you not to harm me, emotionally or psychologically. And here's where many men make a dangerous mistake. They confuse access with entitlement. They assume the door stays open forever, but the female nervous system remembers everything. One moment of pressure, disrespect, or emotional carelessness, and that door closes fast. Tell you what that specific boundary is. Let me slow you down for a moment. Because if you're listening to this hoping for a shortcut, a trick, or a guarantee, I want you to notice that impulse. In my consultations, that impulse alone already tells me something important about a person's emotional maturity. Real connection is never forced. It is permitted. What most people don't realize is that women don't divide touch into sexual and non-sexual the way men often do. The female brain categorizes touch very differently. It asks one primary question first. Does this person respect my internal world? Now, the specific area I'm talking about is not intimate in the way social media likes to exaggerate. It is the upper back and shoulders, especially from behind. This area is deeply connected to vulnerability in the female nervous system. From a neurological perspective, this region sits close to the heart, lungs, and spinal cord. When a woman allows someone to place a hand there naturally, not abruptly, not possessively, it signals something profound. It means her brain is not in defense mode. In clinical terms, her sympathetic nervous system has relaxed. Her body is no longer preparing to protect itself. That only happens when trust has already formed. In my practice, I've heard women say, I never let people touch me there. And when I ask why, the answer is rarely logical. They say things like, it feels too close. It feels too personal. I don't like being guided or steered. That's because the shoulders and upper back are associated with control and direction. Who stands behind you can influence where you move next. On a subconscious level, allowing someone there is allowing influence. Here's something uncomfortable, but important. When a woman permits this touch without flinching, pulling away, or stiffening, it usually means she already feels emotionally aligned with you. The decision was made internally long before the touch happened. But, and this matters deeply, this is not a green light to escalate. This is where men often ruin everything. The female brain does not reward entitlement. The moment a touch becomes assumptive rather than responsive, the amygdala lights up again. Even if she doesn't say anything, her body remembers. In my consultations after breakups, women often describe the exact moment they emotionally withdrew. It's rarely something dramatic. It's usually a moment where someone took more than was offered. Touch, for women, is a conversation. When you stop listening, the conversation ends. Let me ask you something quietly, the way I ask my patients when I'm trying to see what they're really aware of. Have you ever noticed how quickly a woman's body answers before her mouth does? Most people don't. They're too busy listening for words, waiting for permission to be spoken out loud. But the truth is, the female nervous system speaks first, and it speaks in micro reactions. In my consultation room, I often say this gently: your body reacted before you decided anything. And almost every woman nods, because she remembers. Here's what most men are never taught. Women constantly test emotional safety, but they do it unconsciously. Not through games, through tiny physical signals that last less than a second. A slight shoulder lift, a breath held just a bit longer, muscle tone changing under the skin. These are not random. They are neurological responses. When a woman allows touch on her upper back or shoulders, her body immediately evaluates what happens next. Does the hand stay light or become heavy? Does it linger too long? Does it guide or control? Does it respect her pace? The brain is tracking all of it. In neuroscience, we call this somatic memory. The body stores emotional information even when the mind tries to rationalize it away. That's why a woman might say, "I don't know why, I just felt uncomfortable after that." Her nervous system already decided before she could explain it. This is where men often misunderstand silence. They assume silence means approval. But in female psychology, silence often means evaluation. In my practice, women describe moments like this: he didn't do anything wrong, but something shifted. That shift is the body pulling back trust. What most people don't realize is that attraction can exist alongside withdrawal. A woman may still smile, still talk, still respond, but emotionally, she has already stepped back. And once the nervous system associates someone with tension instead of calm, rebuilding safety is extremely difficult. This is why emotional intelligence matters more than confidence. A confident man who ignores microsignals feels unsafe. A calm, attentive man who notices small changes feels grounding. Here is an uncomfortable truth I tell men who genuinely want healthy relationships. If you have to push, guess, or test limits, you are already behind. When a woman feels safe, she naturally opens. Her body tells you long before her mouth does. I want to slow this conversation down again, because this is where things become uncomfortable, but honest. In my clinical work, this is the part where many women's voices soften, and many men suddenly realize they were never taught this. Have you ever wondered why a woman sometimes opens emotionally or physically, and then later pulls away with confusion or guilt? Most people explain it as mixed signals. But that explanation is lazy. What's really happening lives much deeper in female attachment psychology. In my consultation room, I often hear women say, "I don't know why I let him get that close so quickly." Notice the word "let." There is often regret attached, not because the man was bad, but because her nervous system overrode her long-term emotional needs in the moment. Here's what most people don't realize. Some women have learned, often very early in life, to associate closeness with approval. Their brains are highly sensitive to connection cues. When someone feels calm, attentive, or emotionally present, their oxytocin rises very fast. Oxytocin does not ask whether someone is compatible. It only asks, do I feel safe right now? This is especially true for women with anxious or trauma-influenced attachment styles. Their nervous systems mistake relief for intimacy. The moment tension drops, the body opens, even if the mind hasn't caught up yet. Allowing access to vulnerable areas like the upper back and shoulders can happen early for these women, not because they are careless, but because their brains are craving regulation. A calm presence feels like oxygen. But here is the part no one warns them about. Once the initial soothing fades, the prefrontal cortex comes back online. Reality returns. Questions arise. Do I really feel seen? Do I feel emotionally safe long term? Was I responding to him or to my own unmet needs? When the answer is unclear, withdrawal happens. In my practice, I see the aftermath on both sides. Women feel ashamed, blaming themselves for opening too fast. Men feel blindsided, confused, sometimes angry, believing they were led on. But the truth is more complex. One nervous system opened too quickly. The other misunderstood what that opening meant. This is why I always say, access does not equal attachment. Permission does not equal permanence. When a man assumes emotional ownership too early, it activates fear rather than closeness. Even if the woman doesn't articulate it, her body begins to pull away to restore autonomy. I often say to my patients, especially when they are trying to understand why some connections feel calm from the beginning while others feel intense and confusing. Intensity is not intimacy. And for emotionally healthy women, this difference is very clear, both in the body and in the brain. What most people don't realize is that secure attachment feels almost boring at first. There is no emotional spike, no rush, no nervous anticipation. And because of that, many people mistake it for lack of chemistry. In my consultations, emotionally secure women describe early interactions very differently. They say things like, I felt relaxed around him. I didn't feel the need to impress. I could breathe normally. That's not romance language. That's nervous system language. For these women, boundaries are not walls. They are filters. They don't open quickly, but when they do, they open steadily. When an emotionally healthy woman allows touch on her upper back or shoulders, it usually comes after consistent emotional reliability, not a single moment of connection. Her body doesn't rush. Her breathing stays even. Her muscles don't soften suddenly. They soften gradually. This matters because her brain is integrating information over time. The prefrontal cortex stays engaged. She is observing how you handle frustration, how you respond to disagreement, how you respect her autonomy. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If access happens very early and feels intense, it often says more about unresolved emotional patterns than about deep compatibility. Secure women don't confuse calm with disinterest. They trust slow safety more than fast closeness. In my practice, I often have to gently correct a common belief. Many men think women want to be pursued aggressively, but emotionally healthy women are actually repelled by pressure, even subtle pressure. Pressure activates the sympathetic nervous system. Safety activates connection. When a secure woman senses entitlement, especially after allowing a small boundary, her nervous system tightens. Not dramatically, quietly. She doesn't argue. She distances. And here's something rarely said out loud. Secure women are very sensitive to how men interpret access. If a man treats permission as ownership, she feels misunderstood. And feeling misunderstood is one of the fastest ways a woman emotionally disconnects. We talk about long-term bonding. I want you to hear something I say very carefully in my clinic, usually when the room goes quiet. Respect is not passive. It is something the nervous system feels over time. Most people think attraction is what keeps a connection alive. But attraction is volatile. What sustains emotional attachment, especially for women, is consistency without pressure. In my consultations, when women describe relationships that felt deeply bonding and safe, they rarely mention grand gestures. They talk about predictability. They talk about how someone responded when they were tired, distracted, or emotionally unavailable. This is where respecting that specific boundary, the upper back and shoulders, becomes symbolic rather than physical. When a man consistently treats access as something to be honored, not used, the female brain starts forming what we call secure relational memory. Her nervous system learns, I don't have to guard myself here. Oxytocin continues to rise, but in a stable way. Cortisol, the stress hormone, stays low. The body associates this person with calm regulation, not emotional spikes. Here's something no one explains honestly. When a woman feels emotionally regulated with someone, desire deepens, not dramatically, but steadily. It doesn't scream, it roots. In long-term relationships I've observed clinically, women often say, I didn't fall fast, but I fell deeply. That depth comes from repeated experiences of being respected when vulnerable. This is also why emotionally intelligent men don't rush progression. They understand that safety compounds. But when respect breaks, even subtly, the effect is immediate. A hand that lingers when it shouldn't. A tone that assumes closeness instead of asking for it. A comment that treats access as earned forever. The female nervous system does not argue with these moments. It withdraws quietly. This is why some relationships feel like they suddenly go cold. Nothing big happened. But safety eroded. In my practice, I often see men trying to fix this with more effort, more contact, more reassurance. But safety cannot be chased. It must be restored through space and respect. Let me end this conversation the way I often end a difficult session, with honesty, not comfort. Because what I'm about to say is something many people don't want to hear, but deeply need to understand. There is no body part that makes someone yours. If that sentence disappoints you, pause there. That reaction itself matters. What most people don't realize is that the female nervous system does not bond to touch. It bonds to how touch is handled. The difference is everything. In my 20 years as a clinician, I've seen women open their most vulnerable boundaries to men who never truly saw them, and withhold those same boundaries from men who did. The deciding factor was never access. It was interpretation. When a woman allows someone into that subtle, vulnerable space near her upper back and shoulders, what she is really saying is, I trust you with my safety in this moment. Nothing more. Nothing permanent. The moment a man translates that trust into ownership, certainty, or entitlement, the bond begins to fracture, not loudly, internally. This is something no one warns you about. Women often don't leave when they feel unsafe. They emotionally disengage first. By the time distance becomes visible, the decision was made long ago in the body. In my consultation room, women describe it this way. I stopped feeling relaxed around him. That sentence is more important than any argument or explanation. Relaxation is the gateway to desire, attachment, and emotional openness in female psychology. Without it, connection becomes performative. Here's the quiet truth I want you to sit with. The men who maintain deep, lasting bonds are not the ones who look for signals. They are the ones who create conditions. They don't ask, what can I take? They ask, often unconsciously, how can I remain safe to open around? And women feel that difference immediately. So if you take anything from this, let it be this. touch is never the beginning of attachment. It is the result of emotional safety already established. And when that safety is respected, not rushed, not claimed, not tested, it becomes something far more powerful than access. It becomes choice.